So I do apologize for that for any of you that were joining on, because I do want to talk about retakes, and I want to talk, not for like, get deep into it, but like kind of go through like what I kind of did as a teacher and kind of my thoughts like on retakes, the benefits, the negatives with giving retakes. And because I used to not always do it. Like I remember, I think there is a fine line with the retakes. And I think it's something that we have to, I think it's something we have to be a little bit careful with, how we are applying the retakes and not just like giving out retakes for, just to take retakes, because I think there is a danger, I guess you would say, of having negative impact with just letting students, have retakes. And that's one of the things that I think when I first gave out retakes, it was like, I just gave out retakes. Like any kid can get a retake and they can take it as many times. And there's some animosity that happened for students that like got the good grade. They studied, they worked hard, right? And they got the good grade and they're like, why do I get the same grade as somebody that was, had to take the like retake 5 times and they never did their homework and they don't pay attention in class. And, they're just retaking the test, and every single time they're retaking it, they're just, cheating off of basically their older tests and getting better and better. Right. And I can get it. So, that was one thing that I remember I was like, I'm not sure if I fully want students just retaking stuff and just to kind of game the system and get better and better at it. So yeah, I had to redraft some things, but I do think that, I'm not in the camp of like, nobody deserves a retake. And that's one thing, I asked you guys like on my community channel, I meant to do this actually earlier over the weekend and I forgot about it. So I just posted it now. And even now, like I just posted it a couple minutes ago and we already have, I think over 100 votes so far. Yeah. Over 150 votes. And it's a resounding like 90%, over 90% say we should have retakes. So I don't think anybody wants to go back to the days of like high takes testing with like no retakes, but yeah, I think there is some conditions though that definitely there's definitely some conditions that need to happen. And so that was one of the things that, that I started to do. And also like, I don't think retakes need to be done on everything. That was like the other problem that I kind of had. Like I used to give assessments on homework. I used to give assessments on quizzes and tests, right? And so what I did is I only allowed retakes on test. So if a student was not doing their homework, or let's say get a bad grade on their, on their homework for whatever reason, wait, never mind. Yeah. If they were not doing their homework or the homework grade was hurting them, then I would simply like drop it, just like their quizzes. Like if they didn't do well on their quiz, I mean, obviously I always wanted students to, one thing I used to have them do was like, they had to like turn in their correct answers and then I would drop it. But yeah, a lot of times I would just drop those things. Like I didn't always do retakes, because the problem with always doing retakes is one, a lot of students won't take it as like serious, as if they knew like they were not going to have like a retakes, or if they were going to have retakes, compared to having a retake or not having a retake. And then the other thing that would happen was it's a lot of work to deal with retakes. I actually remember like almost hating sometimes like, or despising sometimes retakes, just because as a teacher, I'm like, it would take, especially it would take quite a bit, to kind of like regrade a test or, and anything like that. So obviously I wanted to encourage students. It was different. Like I want to encourage students to, do retakes for the sake of learning to get better at the material. But I wanted to discourage students that were just doing retakes, just for the grade, and they weren't really actually learning from their mistakes or doing anything like that. So I thought, how can I do this? Like, how can I encourage that? And so what I came up with, was one thing I wanted students to do is like, there was no way I'm going to allow them to have a retake unless they had their homework done. Like that was like the main thing they had to have done was like their homework had to be turned in. And then also I think they had to make sure all their quizzes had like the corrected answers. So like, you just can't like fail a quiz or do poorly on a quiz and not like correct your answers. Like you need to go back and show me that you have corrected, all of your work, that you've gone back, you've studied all this stuff. And I found out like if I required that information ahead of time, before students would take a test, a lot of times students would not need a retake. They would do good enough just by doing those base stuff. But I also want to encourage students that, maybe, I don't know, things could have came up. They may have had a tough time and they weren't able to, get as good as grade they wanted to. So that would be one thing that I would ask them to go ahead and do that's one of those things I would ask them to go ahead and do before I would allow them to issue the retake. And the other thing that I always thought was like really helpful, and this was probably the most beneficial that I ever did, was rather than just like giving retakes, just be like, oh, here's your retake, best of luck, or like you jump through these hoops. The thing that I loved the most was like for the student to get a retake, they had to come and talk with me. That was by far the best thing that I ever did. And the reason why, because it's twofold. One is students had to kind of like live up to, their failures in a regard. Like if they wanted to retake, like they just needed to talk to me. They needed to bring in and like we could talk about their tests. I could see about why they're struggling and stuff like that. Because what I found is like when I just gave retakes for retake's sake, and everybody gets a retake, right? Then students would just come in, take retakes, and they wanted to kind of like avoid me or like avoid the issue. But when I say like, oh, we have to stay after class, you have to talk to me. Like, let's evaluate, what went wrong? Like, what can we do to help you? How can I help you? Like a lot of times it was kind of uncomfortable, especially for the student to be like, oh crap, I don't want to talk about my grade. I don't want to talk about what I need to do, for the retakes. And so, I mean, it discouraged some students. I hope it didn't discourage some of them that should be taking their retakes and doing it. But I think it also discouraged some students that like, you can do that once, right? You can not do your homework and let's say you didn't do your homework and let's say you failed all your quizzes and you didn't really like study them. Like, all right, so you come to me, we talk about your quiz, like getting a retake. I'm like, all right, I'll give you a retake, but I'm like, you need to do better, right? Like I need to have you doing your homework. If you don't know how to do your homework, I need you staying after class. Like I need you asking more questions. So, maybe paying better attention, right? And so let's say like the next test comes around and the student's doing the same behavior, right? And so like the funny thing is like, all right, the first time I gave you I told you what we need to improve. Now here comes the next one. Guess what? You want another retake and you're not improving. Like what's going on here? Like what's the issue? And then so we would make like an agreement, like, all right, maybe I'll allow this one more time, but I'm like, if I'm not seeing some certain improvement or whatever else, like if you're not coming in for help, like I'm not going to allow these retakes. And it was a very like informal rule. Like I never had a rule where I was like, all right, I'm not going to allow retakes or you only get 2 retakes or anything else. I kind of left it as a case by case basis. Because there would definitely be a lot of students that I felt like they're putting in a lot of work. They really were struggling in my class, but they're asking questions. They were, you could see that they were studying. You could see that they were struggling in the class, but they were doing their best, and they weren't taking advantage of my system. Sometimes I would allow those students, like I would give them the benefit of doubt. Like I would allow them to, retake those tests at a later date. Right. And cause I could see like it was just like one of those things that they're learning, they're putting in the work, but it's like, things are just not coming quick to them. Right. Maybe they had a bad teacher, maybe last year, I don't know, they didn't learn or something happened in that regard, So I kind of left it a little bit flexible, but, I am in the camp that students need retakes. I do think we need to learn from our mistakes. Like that's where you're gonna get the most impact. And I think the thing that I hate the most is when students would get like a failing grade or get a grade, anything, even if they get like one question wrong and they throw away their test. I'm like, that is the best piece of information you can possibly have. When you have a test or a quiz or homework, like when you get something with feedback on it, and I would especially get mad because I knew how much time it took me to, spend, I'm spending time at home grading all that stuff, staying up really late, waking up in the morning. And for a student just to like throw it away or like, rightfully so, be mad, right? And especially they put in time, work, and effort. But, my whole goal and thought process, as we're getting into this, second half of the year, it's like you're going through these, mini assessments to only get better and to learn and to take, eventually also have like a final exam and so forth. So you want to make sure that you're taking all this feedback that you possibly can. And especially too, like if I'm giving you the opportunity of feedback, or like as a retake, like take advantage of that, don't be throwing that, don't be throwing that away and like losing out on that opportunity. Like take advantage of that. I think, you know, a lot of times students would give me, you know, positive feedback for, you know, allowing retakes or allowing opportunities, you know, and stuff like that. But a lot of students just wouldn't take advantage of it. So it was always kind of sad. So, all right. Well, I mean, that's kind of my thought process. But let me see what kind of questions or things you guys have. And then if you guys have any other questions or anything else on retakes, you guys can post them in the chat. I'm going to try to